So hi everyone, good morning. I'm quite amazed so many people are here so early because, um, yeah, and also just generally amazed so many people who turn up to this. I mean, whenever I get invited to these sort of things at universities or whatever, it's either like, 5 people in the room that are like standing there like, what am I doing with my life? Or um, but to see so many people actively engaged in last night and also just really curious, like, normally as well at these sort of things, I like people come up to me and they're kind of like, "Hey, how's it going? How can I get a show at Cafe Otto?" But then, like last night, loads of people just came up and just said hi to me, and I really don't like bringing up the Cafe Otto thing. Actually, it's nice to just talk to people on a level basis, like we're all human beings, and that was really good. So I just want to thank Caleb and Simon and Sam and everyone involved with Outlands made this happen because I think it's really important that we're having these conversations. And I'm not part of the Outlands network. I'm part of the Metropolitan elite. I'm like I'm like the nightmare that kind of hovers over all this. But I am from Glasgow and I'm from a town. I think towns have gained this sort of authentocratic sort of stature within popular culture these days. So I'm from a town, not from a city. Yeah, I'm from Motherwell, and I was putting on gigs throughout my life. Up in Glasgow, and then I moved down to Cafe Otto. And I just want to say that, speaking from a Glasgow and London-based perspective, we are having kind of similar conversations here about precarity and what the hell are we doing, and but also we're looking to simulate, like Caleb was talking about, eclipse it with this sense of joy and love, which I think is extremely important right now because centrism can jog it. So I was kindly asked to come and talk about this. So this was a piece that was published 4th of June 2019 in a really fantastic publication called The New Socialist. Smaller publications are really struggling these days, and I think actually New Left media is really quite high standard too these days. New Socialist is one of the best. Tribune magazine, there's Novara. I stopped reading The Guardian. Like, really, I mean, The Guardian's all right, but I mean, we have a problem with media in this country. And The Quietist, like last night, I think it's really important that we support independent media and we give these subjects the kind of respect that they deserve. So this piece was born, Julie, out of two kind of situations to do in my own life and work. So the first was to do with a kind of egregious situation that musicians from the likes of India and Africa have to go through to perform in the UK, and the kind of divisions and hierarchies that are involved with that, and the kind of ideas of Western imperialism, colonialism that come with that. Really depressing, and obviously have just got worse. Simultaneously, it also came out of a lot of frustrations I had with the kind of ideation and terminology behind experimental music and where it came from in the first place, and how the West has kind of taken kind of ontological ownership of that term, and how I kind of wanted to kind of break that up a little bit. There's actually so much to get through, so I want to kind of talk about the piece, but also from there want to talk a little bit about the situation that we find ourselves in with regards to Europe and what's going to happen with the Brexit words. And also simultaneously, I think it's quite good these things to be quite practical. So I'm going to end today on a little bit about possible solutions to dealing with this. And yeah, after, of course, it would be really good to talk a bit more about this and maybe organize a bit. So the introduction to the piece kind of gives an idea of what to expect. So I'll just actually read that out because maybe that's the best way of going about this. So with music's mass commercialization siphoned through the haze of online algorithms, ephemeral online marketing, and hyper-corporate live music events, it's easy to forget its potential as an alternative form of language. It's a catalyst for bringing people together, a space where people can share analogies, a binding agent for bodies to build collective strength, the groundwork for resistance. We must never forget this potential, and we must stop borders from restricting and repressing it. So to give a bit of historical perspective behind this piece, I thought it was quite good to frame it within what music has been outside, well, both inside and outside Western perspectives. So, for example, in Africa, you've got the likes of tribes communicating with one another through music, like through daily communication while working. You have amazing folk songs for the decades, centuries, um, about sea shanties. There was I used the example of the Cutty Wren, this amazing piece that you can hear online. I like the Phil Minton version, and it's about it was about the peasants that revolted against these mercenary police force in 1381, and they ate them. It's wicked. So yeah, to emphasize the importance and potential of music, it's worth considering Sarah Ahmed's description of communities like bodies. I think this is a really good metaphor. Like communities, bodies are ecosystems collated by infinitely complex sets of inner subjectivities, skin, blood, and bone. They have nervous systems that rely on nurture, connection, and understanding. So within this metaphor, music holds the potential to be a binding agent between organs. It can make the pump flow to make bodies come to life. So, world exclusive Counterflows 2020. This is the lineup that's not announced yet. It'll be announced on the 10th of February. But I run this festival for a guy called Alistair Campbell. He ran the Weekend Festival in Stirling with David Keenan, and it was one of the first experimental festivals in the whole of the UK, I think, actually. Definitely in Scotland. So, to briefly talk about Counterflows and the ideology behind that, both myself and Alistair are big music fans, but Alistair comes from a kind of folk background and world music background, and I'm from I don't know, whatever the hell background. The Counterflows ideology we want to create is kind of no headliners at all. We want to book acts that we feel deserve more exposure and payment. We don't create hierarchical billing. There's loads of breaks in the program, and there's no kind of clashing within the program. And we want people to have this kind of community-based, holistic experience of music, which it kind of feeds back into the idea of what music should be. It shouldn't be this kind of, like Frieze art fair or something like that, where you go from one room to the other. I find that the most bizarre thing in the world. So it's also celebrating internationalism and community in lots of different ways. So there's artists from London, Leeds, Glasgow, but then also you've got lots of different types of what could be deemed experimental music from Ethiopia, Jamaica, Indonesia, other places. So Counterflows is totally just a drop in the ocean. There's loads of amazing people doing this sort of work, many of which are in the room. It's precarious, but we exist, and I'm so happy it can exist. So it's just a drop in the ocean, one of the many organisations encouraging an open, international, pluralistic dialogue within the arts, with the potential to nurture a shared space where, as artists and audiences, we can feel deeply connected and deeply alive, and where people and their lives are more than mere commodities feels more important than ever. So, so this is the frustration I had with Borders. So this is an act that we tried to book for 2019's Counterflows that couldn't perform at the festival. It was really embarrassingly funded by the Arts Council, who they were diabolical in dealing with it in a way that I felt was utterly embarrassing. This is an act called the Ghana Footsteps. They were born out of this. It was a Scottish-based art project where this place called Green Door in Glasgow went over to Taffy in Ghana, and they created this kind of recording and art studio. And lots of musicians from Glasgow went over, and they were it was this kind of sharing space between learning about Volta rhythms from the Ghana region, but also people were bringing in their own ideas from a kind of Western perspective. And, that's led with its own hierarchies and issues and so on. But I think the reason we wanted to do this is because loads of people from Glasgow and so on were going over to Taffy and playing with these people, but those people could never come over here. So we got 15 grand to do this project, and lo and behold, the government, well, the Home Office refused the visa, so it did not happen. As well as that, Iranian percussionist called Mohammad Reza Mortazavi got his, well, he didn't even get his refused. He got a fast-track visa that was 2 weeks late. He had to pay like £500 for it, and it didn't even come. So, sorry, I think this mic is kind of going in and out, so sorry about the volume jumps. So visa rejection delays are nothing new in the UK. The last year, The Guardian, sorry to criticise The Guardian, but you know it's important in a way sometimes. The Guardian published a piece on how the UK border agency's decision are affecting the UK music industry, economies and ecosystems. I can't remember the name of the piece, but it highlights the kind of shared collective disappointment and infuriation at the UK border agency's application processes, communication process and decisions. I think one of the most shocking accounts came from Ben Mackes, the manager of a legendary Ghanaian highlife artist that I'm sure many people know called Ibo Taylor, who was refused entry despite having previously entered the UK to perform countless times, and I've seen him in the UK as well, during his 60-year career. In the end, Mackes said, we lost 20,000 euros in flights and fees. And of course, you don't get any of that back. There's no insurance system that can possibly exist. Sorry, it will get positive. Oh, fuck. Yeah, sorry, I didn't even see what the slide was. Yeah, so I'm actually going to read directly from the piece here because it's very specific information, and I think it's better that I just go straight to it rather than kind of ramble like I have already. So this is about the Home Office, who I think shouldn't exist. If one needs a visa to enter the UK, the application processes are costly, rigorous, and often confusing. The Tier 5 creative and sporting visa application makes several intrusive and exclusionary demands, including inquiries into artists' bank statements. Musicians are required to provide bank statements covering 90 days to show they have at least £945 in savings. That's never happened in my entire life, continually for an entire period. This isn't just a racist and classist demand. In Ghana, where many people do not have bank accounts, like the Ghana Footsteps, this instantly renders the application process near impossible. On top of this, many artists in Ghana do not carry photo ID or have registered home addresses, meaning the amount of pre-visa application work can take months. It's worth noting that there's no remuneration or insurance system, like I mentioned, for a failed or delayed visa application. We were extremely lucky that the British Council, who were funding the Ghana Footsteps performance, in an amazing act of goodwill, despite being utterly useless, permitted us to reallocate that funding. This allowed Ghana to make a short film, the Ghana Footsteps, to make a short film that was screened at the festival and to offer a series of drum workshops in Taffy. If we didn't have that, and if we weren't so fortunate, all of the work and costs involved outside of paying for the visa applications, that's gathering the paperwork, project administration, preparing music, rehearsing, traveling to and from embassies, would have been lost to IFA. So once visa applications are submitted, there's no way of speeding up the process or checking on its process beyond the categories yet to be processed, in process, failed, or accepted. If you contact the UK Border Agency, the calls will cost £1.37 per minute on top of standard network charges, with waiting times often lasting hours. Email inquiries cost £5.48. The process recalls a similar system introduced in prisons in Jersey and Guernsey, where families have to pay £10 to use an encrypted video call service if they wish to contact their incarcerated loved ones. Other colonialized bodies are capitalized upon the same colonial state, the same state that incarcerates or rejects them. So yeah, this is slightly more positive. It will actually get positive. The idea is to be positive, you know. So yeah, visa failures are more than unpaid work for new audiences, and they're also, I mean, there's obvious cultural benefits of artists from outside the UK and so on coming here, and there's tons of economic benefits, of which I won't list. I don't have quite the right amount of time. But I want to use the example of Negi Negi Festival. I'm sure some people have heard of this label, but it's It's an African-based festival that, and kind of coming out of Uganda, that has, I guess it's like this kind of new modern, extremely strange dance music that's coming out of there, and acts like Sounds of Cecil, Machiavelli, MC Ala, Duke. Oh, there's loads. It's an incredible label. You need to check it out. But what I want to talk about briefly is this is an artist that we hosted at Counterflows before the Modern Institute, and Aerosmith we've not hosted, but I'm sure you know him. The people in Uganda invited these artists out to Uganda to the festival, and they recorded music there for a few weeks. Ryan Trenner also went out. I'm sure some people who know him, the son of the ginger Mark Fell. And Nikisi went out as well, who's another really interesting artist. So what I find that's kind of diabolical about this, and sorry to be negative as well, is we can come over to them and create this amazing music together, and they can't come here, And the reason that this actually started in the first place is Sounds of Cecil, Machiavelli was at Counterflows Festival and performed. It was amazing. And they just started hanging out at the Modern Institute, and they were hanging out for a few more days in Glasgow, and Modern Institute was, hey, come round to our flat, let's jam for a bit. And then they were kind of like, oh, let's just keep on doing this, and they invited the Modern Institute over. And this release is absolutely bonkers, and it's like the future of music or something like that. And it shows you the possibilities of what happens when you can break down borders. So despite the infinitely complex colonial and historical ties between Uganda and the UK, like I've mentioned, and the inevitability of this sort of music entering into profoundly unequal international economy, the seeds for positive international solidarity can be sown. When artists are granted access to move between countries, we can use these seeds to grow a new set of roots, a new set of roots to hold us together. That's Pierre Schaeffer checking his Facebook in 1940. So part of the reason that Counterflows exists is to challenge the experimental music's predominantly white US/Eurocentric histories and institutional histories, like Pierre Schaeffer, one of the kind of I guess, modernists of musique concrète music, the kind of creators of it. So it's, to bring the kind of inert hierarchies and dogmas of this to trial, to kickstart an expanded inclusive dialogue concerning what is radical music, where does it come from, how does it come into being, and how does it flourish? So, there's numerous definitions of experimental music. I think the term is I don't know, it's silly, but there's interdeterminacy, where you lay out certain kind of elements and those can be kind of played around with. Free improvisation, where people kind of muck about on stage. Not really, but you know what I mean. There's a whole language behind that, and people like Derek Bailey respect, so on. Musique concrète as well, like our man Pierre Schaeffer, Facebook man there. I'm going to talk a little about Pierre Schaeffer and his ideas, because they're actually really radical, even though this is a kind of institutional history. So while experimental music's legacy has expanded and evolved over the decades, it risks, through its own inertia, becoming rigid and uniform. Let's consider briefly Pierre Schaeffer's radical proposition for reduced listening, an ideology at the heart of musique concrète. Partially a result of the introduction of tape recorders, and with it the ability to listen closer than ever before to sounds. Schaeffer famously said that all sound can be considered music, and I stand by that as well. I think that's a really beautiful way about thinking about music and art and so on. This is in itself a radical internationalist and almost utopian proposition, one that can emancipate all forms of music from vague genre tropes or geographical bias. So why then has contemporary musique concrète, sorry, I work at Cafe Auto, we play a put into this, we all kind of do. Why has it become a largely academic, Eurocentric and elitist enunciation, or to put it bluntly, a bunch of dudes with expensive synthesizers? No offense, there's some people that do that really well. This is a Tibetan score. I can't remember which century this is from. I think it's maybe 16th century. It's maybe probably before, I don't know. So if Western, I'm going to explain a little bit about this. So yeah, so if Western experimental music ideology has emancipated itself, deconstructed itself, and experimented on itself, then it's done so within its own history, a history steeped in and predicated on the classical 12-tone harmonic scale. So for all the objective truths and potentials that the music claims to offer by performatively departing from this structure, one is left with the awkward question, what about music and cultures that didn't lean on that 12-tone scale in the first place? So you have, for example, these are really beautiful Tibetan kind of vocal scores. Music's remarkable as well, you should check it out. There's other examples as well. I mean, obviously, sorry to go back to this briefly, the likes of Cornelius Caligiuri, Morton Feldman, Xenakis, so on, Stockhausen, they kind of invented the ideas, oh, we invented graphic scores. It was like, no, you didn't. So there's also the issue of, you know, for example, with the minimalists, for example, Hindustani classical music and South Indian classical music. Where's the footnote for that? It's occasionally mentioned in, you know, like Lamont Young and so on, thinking it's not really good enough, I would say. You know, and then if we look at the Western world as well, there's people that are kind of coming to prominence now, like Julius Eastman, but while he was alive and kind of expanding upon the ideas within experimental music and minimal music, he was completely more or less ignored by the institutions, and he was actually homeless as well, and eventually died far too young. But yeah, but I mean, I guess this is the thing, is Western experimental music has always taken this kind of petition attitude, extracting labor and inspiration from othered bodies while doing nothing to challenge and to actively upholding the violent imperial process of global white supremacy. How am I doing for time, by the way? Are we okay? No, I think we're a wee bit behind. Yeah. I'm almost gonna. This is kind of. I'm just gonna finish off with a few bits and bobs from the piece. The piece is still online, but this is an amazing book. Everyone should read it. And if you haven't heard the music within it, you need to hear that as well. George Lewis, who's composer, improviser, and kind of key ideologue behind a lot of the kind of black radical thinking, wrote this book, and it's about the AACM, which was a kind of collective born out of the 1960s. In Chicago, it gave birth to the likes of Art Ensemble Chicago. It was led by Michal Richard Abrams, really amazing pianist and composer. Anthony Braxton was involved, Wadada Leo Smith, Henry Threadgill, Air. I mean, it's an incredible history, and it's also very much within this idea of the joyous thing, I would argue too. So I use this example from this book that when I was reading, I couldn't really quite believe. Is I'm sure many people in this room have heard of John Cage, who's the kind of probably the key ideologue behind experimental music and notions of silence and so on. And he's actually, I mean, he's extremely important, but I'm going to take the piss out of him. Not really. It's a critique. So in this book, George Lewis writes about a 1965 recording session between John Cage and a set of what he thought were students. But actually, one of them was the very incredible Joseph Jarman, who you can see up on that image. And he was a member of the Art Ensemble Chicago, who I think are probably one of the most absolutely vital groups about expanding the language, experimental musics, jazz, and so on. So to take from the book, John Cage, within this recording session, framed himself as something of a teacher for a group of unnamed black musicians. Moreover, despite his professed lack of interest in improvisation, reiterated later in the interview that was done in this book, Cage somehow managed to find a way to critique the said musicians' practice at their request. And I said to them, John Cage said, that one of the problems was that when they got loud and they said, it's mental, how could we change that? They were willing to change. Well, one could well imagine the AACM musicians were open to learning from Cage. The notion that these musicians would have learned about space and silence from him is at variance with the recorded evidence of the AACM improvisations from the period. If you want an illustration of that, listen to the very beautiful album People in Sorrow by Ensemble Chicago. It changed my life, and there's lots of silence in it. Moreover, as Cage scholar Rebecca Y. Kim has noted in an unpublished paper, the programme notes from the Cage Jarman event employed a language of historical synchronicity, identifying two parallel movements in new music, hardly an attitude that one might attribute to a mentor-student relationship. The Downbeat Review, which had no particular criticism of John Cage's work per se, criticised Jarman and his musicians for their supposed failure to respond to John Cage's sound. Cage was one of the leading figures, like I mentioned, in experimental music. So both he and the contemporary media chose to both strip Jarman of his agency and his critique of his group in such an ignorant and self-aggrandizing manner, serves to accentuate the elitist, racist histories of experimental music and its lack of engagement with other groundbreaking marginal musics. And Cage's famous experimental music, presented as a statement lecture to Music Teachers Association in Chicago in 1957, he suggests that experimental music should not be an attempt to bring out the order of chaos, nor to suggest improvements in creation, but to simply a way of waking up to the very life we're living in, which I think is quite beautiful in a way. And considering this anti-purist call to arms, a cry for greater human understanding through experimental music, why is this philosophy not followed through in his practice? Moreover, when we consider that much of Cage's philosophy and musical output is based upon readings of Indian Zen Buddhist philosophy, and that other white musicians extract similar inspiration from other majority world cultures as well, surely the inclusion of non-white, non-Western voices would represent the smallest form of symbolic remuneration. It's the least that they could do. And given the advent of the internet, and with it more shared knowledge than ever before of marginalized bodies, cultures, and musics, which I think we can all share here, all of us in the larger music community, and this includes ourselves, must use this information to dissect and challenge these histories. I think there's not really any excuse. I'm almost done. I want to jump to thinking beyond the piece now. And I think this is the first time I've done this. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to skip a bit straight to it. The Conservative government. Yeah, this is what the Conservative government think about people coming into the country. Yeah. Probably read that by now. So as we know, we have a Conservative government currently in power on the 12th of December onwards, and from there we're apparently going to be enacting an Australian-based, points-based immigrant system. What happens from here? A lot of horrific shit for a lot of people. There's going to be a proposed tier 2 work permit for EU citizens. So the kind of cause tier 5 that I'm sure a lot of you have maybe done before, which covers musicians from the likes of Japan, America, South America, Canada, that's going to have to be done for EU citizens, which is a lot of administrative work, a lot of stress for musicians, a lot of stress for us, money. There's a proposition of a compliant environment of citizen-on-citizen document checking, restrictive rules on visas for spouses and elderly relatives, obviously sky-high fees, and a creaking asylum system. Also, what's really worrying within this new Conservative proposition for movement is an attack on judicial review, which is the erosion of appeal of rights in immigration cases, which obviously represents a more important tool than ever for vindicating the rights of migrants. So we've got a really extremely worrying situation, and it affects musicians that are even touring here from the UK going into Europe as well. It's going to be an administrative headache, lots of reforms, and I don't want to depress everyone, so it's now the positive point. What can we do to fight this fucking bullshit? Get a passport. No. One of the things you can do is, sorry if I'm running over, I promise to end really soon. One of the things you can do is join the Musicians Union. I'm sure many of you are in this already. So they are proposing we do a musician's passport, which will last a minimum of 2 years, be free and cheap. And what this will do is you can get into the whole of Europe, and Europeans can come here, and all EU member states can have this, and we can all move freely. What it'll do as well is get rid of the need of carnets and other permits. And it'll also quite essentially cover road crew, technicians, lighting technicians, and so on, and other staff necessary for musicians to do the job. Personally, I mean, I think this is good, but it's a little bit of a cop-up. I think the idea that we have to enforce more legislation and more administration on movement is a barrier to a lot of people. Anyway, this one's a little bit more positive, and I think, I don't know, before I say this as well, I think it's important. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Labour campaign for free movement. I don't expect people to be united within politics here in this room, and I can understand if there's nihilists in the room. I don't understand if there's Tories in the room. I can understand if there's anarchists in the room. I cannot, but I think the situation that we're in, as it currently stands within the last 5 years, I'm very anti-parliamentary tradition, but I do believe that the Labour Party has been the most effective party for democracy and listening to its membership and listening to groups and organisations that are trying to fight for better freedom of movement. So this is the Labour campaign for freedom of movement. So the basis of this is to oppose the current Tory immigration legislation and any curbing of rights. So this will include fighting for a campaign for free movement, equality and rights for migrants. Reject any immigration system based on incomes, migrants' utility to business, the number of caps/targets. They want to close all detention centres. Absolutely, it's a problem. Labour currently supports it. Ensure unconditional rights to family reunion. Maintain and extend freedom movement rights. End no recourse to public funds policies. Scrap all hostile environment measures, use of landlords and public service providers as border guards and restrictions on migrants' NHS access. They also want to actively challenge anti-immigrant narratives, and they want to extend equal rights to vote to all UK residents. So I think this is probably, I've done a bit of research on this, I think this is probably the most effective if you want to be involved with a kind of unionised movement. I mean, some people hate the Labour Party, I can understand that, it's fine. But, there's other parties that are doing work, but I think this has probably been the most effective. And how about a proposition? I genuinely think this is maybe the most positive thing to come from today is we at Counterflows are working in lobbying groups to try and improve freedom of movement for musicians. So, and I was talking to Sam earlier, as part of the thing I want to do this year is to stop reading the BBC and The Guardian and getting deeply frustrated and angry and sad at the world. And I honestly think maybe a good conversation today is, should we maybe form our own lobbying group? I don't know. But if anyone wants to talk about that, I'm here. And I believe we should do something about this because it's a really dire state of affairs, and I believe this music from outside the UK is extremely important. I think it's extremely important that we could continue internationalist dialogues for so many reasons, cultural, human, economic, dare I say. So I'm just going to, yeah, so that's a proposition. I'd love to chat about this, and maybe we can maybe get an email thread going. But I think it's extremely good that we try and be active about this rather than depressed. So similar to the ways in which grassroots politics can energize and mobilize rejected bodies towards liberation, music can build communities, sow the seeds for collective strength, and build resistance. It's an international, polymorphous, and polyamorous phenomenon. It's a power that we must treasure and one we must let flourish without divisions, hierarchies, or borders. Thank you.